Hi Divas, welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about literally whatever I want to, but mostly books. Today I'm going to go through and give you some book recommendations for the best queer representation that I personally have read in novels. I was originally going to do the best and worst queer representation, but going through my recently read and my bookshelf, I realized that I don't really read bad gay representation. If I know a book has bad queer representation, I'm not going to read it. Or at least there weren't enough books that I have read with bad queer representation to where I felt the need to talk about them. So we're just going to do the best, but I wanted to do it in a little bit more of a fun way, and a little bit more of a queer way, and a little bit more of a way that feels true to me. So we're going to do something a little bit chic and a little bit faggy, and that is have an award ceremony for these books. So I have a couple of different categories. We're going to go through the nominees. I'm going to tell you the winners. So instead of the best and the worst, it's going to be the best and the best of the best. So let's just get started. I have 4 different categories, and the first category that we're going to be starting with is queer classics. I put classics in quotation marks because I think that while you can argue that there are a lot of queer classic books from let's say the 70s and earlier, I obviously feel like queer literature has expanded beyond the confines of what it had to be back then. For example, Giovanni's Room, which is nominated for this category, by the way, it came out in 1956, I believe, and because of that, it couldn't get really, really gay with it, which I totally understand and I respect, and that's not a thing against the novel, but I am going to have some more modern books in here, and so it might be a little bit controversial to call them classics, but that's what I'm going to call them. I'll explain when I get there, but let's talk about actually a queer classic, the book that probably fits the category the best, Giovanni's Room. Now, I know that I kind of trashed this a little bit in my last video, but at the end of the day, I still really enjoyed it. I loved this book. I really liked studying this book. I think where this book shines with its queer representation is its depiction of repression. I think that that is where this book really shines. I think that David is such an interesting character, specifically because of the way that he represses his sexuality and the impacts that has in the real world. David's repression causes physical harm to the people that he loves, and I find that so interesting and compelling and heartbreaking. This repression and this fear of being gay isn't even particularly caused by external factors. There are sections of the novel where you feel that and you feel the societal pressure, but for the most part, this repression is completely self-inflicted by David. As queer representation, I think that it has stood the test of time, and for very good reason. Again, I think that it's really impressive that it has stood the test of time, considering the fact that it couldn't really get gay with it, which I feel like that almost benefits the novel in a certain way, because we're not seeing David and Giovanni, fuck nasty style. We know that it happens, but that's not what the book is about. That's not what the book is worried about. And honestly, David would write an entire book about fucking Giovanni and not include a single scene where he fucks Giovanni. That is very David. As a novel, I've mentioned this. I think it's a little bit repetitive. I think it could have been cut 10, 20 pages. Also, when it comes to books about queer men, I do like to try and look for what the author or what the novel is saying about women in the queer community, because I feel like that is a discussion that largely gets ignored, and the place of women in this novel is really interesting. It's either non-existent or affected by David's repression or affected by misogyny. There are a lot of misogynist conversations that happen in this book that feel intentional, but I just don't know what to make of them personally. So my general conclusion, really enjoyed this book, really like this book. I have my issues with it, I have my critiques of it, but I think it's great, I think it's rich, I think it's dense, and I think that it deserves its title of a queer classic. Alright, the next book that I have nominated is possibly the most controversial nomination on this list, so let me explain and defend myself. I have nominated The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo as one of the best queer classics. Now, I know that that is a little bit crazy, but I do think that this is 100% a modern classic, and while I don't think it's like the best of the best, it's like the pinnacle of queer representation, I do think that it meets the bar and then exceeds it by just being a really good novel and a really good love story and romance. I am not particularly a contemporary fiction diva, but Taylor Jenkins Reid just has such an easy to read writing style, and when she like has a hold on her plot, which granted I feel like sometimes she doesn't, I feel like sometimes her plot can just like get away from her sometimes, and like she just does not know how to rein it back in. But when she knows what she's doing with her plot, her writing style just makes her novels so captivating and so easy to read, and you just can't help but be invested in the incredible story that she's telling until the story gets a little bit crazy. I think obviously when we are focusing on Evelyn Hugo, that is the strongest part of the novel. I think that the novel really, really fails in the modern day. I could not tell you a single thing that happens in the modern day other than that stupid plot twist that happens at the end of the book. Oh my god. I will never shut up about that plot twist. I don't want to like spoil the plot twist, but also like there's been over 1 million copies sold. You've probably read this book, and if you haven't, like at that point it's on you. But I'm not going to spoil it. I won't spoil it. I'll just say that I fucking hate the ending. But when we are in Evelyn Hugo's mind, when we're in Evelyn Hugo's time period, in like the 60s to 80s specifically, her romance with Celia St. James specifically, I think that that is where the novel really excels. And again, I don't think that this is doing anything crazy with queer representation particularly, but I do think it's classic, and I do think that it meets the bar, and I think that it deserves a nomination. However, the book that I am going to give the win to in this category, in the best queer classics, the one that I think that you should 100% go out and read, is Nevada by Imogen Binnie. Once again, I think that this is a modern classic, and perhaps the book most arguable for like the queer classic titles in terms of books that were released in the 21st century. I would 100% argue that this is like the queer classic novel of the 21st century. It stood the test of time over the past 13 years. People are still picking this up. They're still talking about it. They're still reading it. We're still having conversations about it, and I don't think that that is going to stop anytime soon. I think that it is going to continue to be a pillar in queer literature, in modern queer literature. I'm saying queer very loosely. I'm kind of saying queer in place of LGBTQ+, because this is a trans novel. This is a novel that follows Maria, who is a trans woman in New York City, and we follow her life until she decides to steal her girlfriend's car and take a cross-country trip to Nevada, where she meets James, who she thinks is probably trans. That kind of is the plot of the entire novel, because it is written in more of a stream of consciousness style, and so we're really getting Maria's thought process and kind of day-to-day life more so than we're getting like the cross-country trip. The writing style takes a second to get used to, but I think that it really works for the novel. I also listened to this as an audiobook, and I believe that Binnie herself narrates the audiobook. I think it's an extremely honest look into the trans experience, and I think that any queer person who reads this novel, even if you haven't struggled with gender identity, I think that you would get a lot out of this. I just think that it is an incredible book. I mean, this has resonated with me. It's resonated with a really wide queer and trans audience, and I think that is because it is kind of relatable, and it is so honest in its writing. So these are the 3 queer classics that I think are really incredible, really important to read, but if you had to only read one of them, I would 100% pick Nevada. Absolutely incredible novel. All right, now the next category that we are going to be talking about is modern dynamics of queer people. The first book that I am nominating is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. Now, I know that I talk about this book all the time. I would say I'll shut up about it eventually, but I mean, I probably won't. But part of the reason that I love this book so much is because of its modern depiction of queer dynamics. I think that it does have a pretty contemporary point of view, but because of that, it has a look into some queer dynamics that are very present day. Queer dynamics that, like, most of us have experienced, but there isn't a bunch of literature on it. For example, I have talked about the dynamic between the girls and the gays before, and I think that Rachel and James is, like, perhaps one of the best representations of, like, a fag-hag relationship. I also love Rachel because she recognizes that she has been shaped by all of these men in her life, but also a lot of these men in her life are queer, and I just think that that is really, really cool and interesting. Now, I do know that there are some critiques about this book that the representation is a little bit stereotypical. For example, like, at one point, James is depicted as, like, the horny twink that goes out all the time and has sex with everybody. And there's another character in this book that is characterized as, you know, this closeted, older, married man. So I think that there is definitely an argument to that claim, and I do understand where people are coming from when they make that argument. However, I disagree. I'm sorry, and let me explain why. I think that what the argument is more so that the situations that these characters find themselves in are stereotypical, but personally, I think that the characters themselves are three-dimensional enough to where it doesn't really matter. It doesn't feel like Caroline O'Donoghue is just throwing these situations in because she wants to and because it's the only thing that she knows about the queer community. It feels like she's talking about this because it's what she wants to talk about. She's adding something new to the conversation. It's propelling the plot forward in a really unique way. I think that the shape that this novel takes by the end of the book is really fascinating, and it's really interesting to get to that journey. And even though Rachel isn't queer and she is, like, the titular character, I think that this is just as much James's novel as it is Rachel's, because James is such a driving force in Rachel's life, and for other plot reasons that I don't want to spoil. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times. I think that this book is absolutely and incredibly chic. I think that it is such a fun read, and again, just really fun, really interesting, really compelling modern depictions of queer dynamics. Absolutely love it. Next in the nominations, I have Bugsy and Other Stories by Raphael Frumkin. Now, not all of these short stories focus on queer characters or, like, queer plot points, but I think a majority of them do, and I want to talk about the ones that do because I think that they are really compelling in a modern sense. Something that I will say, and, like, no tea, no shade, no pink lemonade to Caroline O'Donoghue or Taylor Jenkins Reid, but I do feel like sometimes when you're reading a book, you can kind of tell if it was written by a member of the queer community or if it wasn't. I feel like The Rachel Incident and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo kind of lean into the territory of you can tell that it was written by a straight author. I'm kind of assuming their sexualities, honestly. Maybe I should have Googled this first. Okay, Caroline O'Donoghue is straight. Taylor Jenkins Reid is not. My bad. Love you, diva. Love and light. Anyways, all that goes to say is I do feel like you can tell, and I feel like this goes for any piece of media. I feel like this goes for music. I feel like this goes for movies. You can tell if something was made by queer people or if it was made by straight people. And this was fucking written by a fucking queer. I feel like Frumkin's queer characters are just so real because they come from a place of deep understanding that can only come from the LGBTQ community. Now, in terms of modern dynamics, I think that the titular story, Bugsy, is really fascinating and really compelling because it follows like the BDSM and kink community, which I feel like is a very important aspect of queer culture. And I think it's one of the most like open-minded approaches that I have ever read to BDSM and kink. It like destigmatizes it and recognizes that it does have a place in building community and connection. And then the other story in here that's kind of a standout for me in terms of modern dynamics, I also don't really want to say anything about because I think it's a lot more fun to go in blind. And I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think like the queer character is supposed to be viewed as straight in the beginning, and so like I don't want to really talk about it because again I think it's better to go in blind. So all that goes to say, I think that this is a very worthwhile addition to the category of modern dynamics of gay people, even though not all of these stories follow gay people. Also, if you read this, you're supporting an anti-queer author, which is so important to do. Now, the winner of this category I unfortunately don't have with me because I read a library copy, but I desperately need to get my hands on my own copy because I just want to tear into the book. I want to annotate it. I want to just absolutely destroy it with my thoughts. And that is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I don't really like giving things 5 stars on a first read or a first watch, but this was something that I just had to give 5 stars. I think that it's one of the most technically perfect novels that I've ever read, if not the most technically perfect novel I've read, which is so impressive because it does have an extremely experimental writing style, but that never hinders the novel, in my personal opinion. There are some people to where it has hindered their experience, but honestly, that's a you problem. I'm sorry, but that's a you problem. In the Dream House follows Carmen Maria Machado's experience in a abusive relationship with a woman. I think that it is a really important novel because domestic violence stories generally are always really hard to read, but very important to read. It's not a secret that domestic violence happens inside the house, and so it's hard to speak up about it. It's hard to be believed when you do speak up about it. And as Machado writes about in the book, it is especially more difficult when you are in a queer lesbian relationship. So the entire book feels like a psychological interrogation of not just her partner at the time, but also herself, and then also the systems that were put in place to make this situation happen. I think that it is a book that is going to be so important to so many people, and so I think that it absolutely deserves the win for modern dynamics of queer people. Again, I cannot wait to get my own copy so that I can annotate the hell out of it. I'm so excited. So if you want to read books that have a more contemporary look into the dynamics of the LGBTQ plus community, I would highly recommend The Rachel Incident. I would highly recommend Bugsy, but if you only had to read one, I would read In the Dream House. Love all of these books. Honestly, I think that this is the strongest category. Clock it. All right, the next category that we have is incredible love stories. If you are looking for a romance book specifically, look in this direction. The first book that I have is Swimming in the Dark by, oh god, an author that I don't even want to try to pronounce. Thank God, I googled that. Holy shit. Okay. Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jedrzejewski. And I ate that up. Thank you. Y'all, I'm sorry. I don't even know how it happened, but in my last video, I mispronounced Annie. How the fuck do you mispronounce Annie? I think that this is a really good love story. I am going to tear into it a little bit. I'm going to give you kind of a devil's advocate moment. Personally, I'm bored of this genre of book. I'm bored of the queer romance that is set in a pre-war, post-war time period because everything just feels very similar. You know what you're going to get when you go into these types of books. Going into this book, I knew exactly what I was going to get, and I did get that, and I did enjoy it because it's what I wanted. I'm just getting a little bit bored, and I haven't even read that many of this type of book, this genre of book. I guess I'm really mentioning that because I do like this. I think that this book comes from a very personal place, which does make it a standout in this genre. It's written as an epistolary novel also, which I like and kind of adds to that more personal feeling. However, I feel like by the end of the book, it doesn't really make sense. Like, I don't understand why he wrote it in a letter format. And I also feel like if you do enjoy this type of book, and if this type of book doesn't get stale to you, then you're going to have a great time with this. It really is a standout in this sort of category. I think that it's deserving of a nomination. The next books that I have nominated might be a little bit of a random one, but I do think that it deserves a place, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. Again, really hope that I'm pronouncing those correctly, but if I'm not, I mispronounced Annie before, so I'm sorry. I'm doing my best here. Now, I feel like everybody and their mother has a take about this book, so let me just get my take out of the way. I think that, like, the most common critique that I've heard about this is the fact that, like, the first half is a little bit difficult to get through because you just don't know what's happening, and it is a lot of world building. I 100% agree, but once you get past that, it's absolutely incredible and quite easy to read. The writing can also be very, very flowery, but I think that if you just allow yourself to tap into your pretentious bag, it's fine. And again, I don't particularly mind the fact that it is a bit more flowery because this book has given me some of the most beautiful visual images that I have ever read. I hope to God that they do not try to adapt this into a movie or a TV show. I just do not think that it would translate. However, I think that if they decided to do it and somehow it was done really well, it would be one of the most beautiful pieces of film or television. Like, there are just some striking images in this book. And I think that it is incredibly unique for a science fiction novel. Now, I also think that it is incredibly unique as a queer love story. Everything is going against Red and Blue. Like, their situation is just not a situation that should exist, but they guide each other through their letters and they guide each other through their lives in such an interesting way. I don't know. Is that crazy? I haven't read this book in a while, but I remember really loving the romance. I love the, like, sapphic fantasy, sci-fi, everything about it. I love it. I feel a little bit silly talking about books in the incredible love stories category and not really talking about the love story or the romance in it, but I am trying to keep this spoiler free, and so I'm kind of trying to sell you on, like, other aspects of the novel so that you can experience the romance on your own if you haven't read these books before. So these are the two nominees, but the winner of this category, the book that I think is one of the best queer love stories that I have ever read, is Milk-Fed by Melissa Broder. This is, like, less of a romance and more of, like, an extremely raw and vulnerable look at desire and obsession and yearning. It is so emotionally charged. There are little moments in this book that feel life or death, make or break, because Melissa Broder's writing style is just so intense. I've also said this before, but I think that this is perhaps the best depiction of OCD that I have ever read. I think that Broder herself struggles with OCD, and you can tell in all of her novels that sounds like a crazy read. You can tell because she has such an honest and singular look into the experience of someone with OCD. It's extremely fast-paced, also because the chapters are so short. I think that each chapter is only a couple pages long. And Broder's writing style is so singular that, like, I don't think that this book is going to be for everybody, but I think that, I don't know, the girls that get it will get it, and the girls that don't. And if you don't get it, I don't want to talk to you. No, that sounds mean. I, like, understand why people wouldn't love this book or wouldn't gravitate towards this book. But I also feel like if you read the back and you know what it's about, like, you know what you're getting into. I think that a common critique of this book that I've seen is it's too sexually explicit, and my response to that is fucking get over it. I am an absolute prude when it comes to literature. I clutch my pearls whenever sex scenes come across, and I had no issue with this. Now, that's not to say that, like, there aren't sex scenes in this, there aren't graphic moments, there certainly are, but I don't think that it's, like, as explicit as people make it out to be. And I also think that, like, the writing is good enough to where it doesn't matter. Like, have you ever read a sex scene that has been terribly written? It is horrible to get through. So these are the 3 books that I have nominated for the best romances / love stories. That being Swimming in the Dark, This Is How You Lose the Time War, and then the winner, Milkfed, Melissa Broder. Love all of these books. All right, now we have our final category, which I am titling For the Gays Only. If you are a straight person, you are not allowed to read any of these. And if you do read them and you don't like them, I am not taking your opinion seriously because these books aren't for you. Fuck you. Sorry for alienating my straight audience if I even have one of those. But if you're a queer person, you should definitely read these because I think that you'll have more of an insightful perspective. I think that these are all written for queer people in their own way, which I will get into. I'm trying to decide which book to start with, and I think I'm going to start off with the most controversial book, and that is The Sluts by Dennis Cooper. The reason that I have this in this category is because I think it is a very honest look into a very dark time and place for the queer community that has issues that are still prevalent to this day. This book kind of feels like watching a true crime story fold out in real time over the internet, which is really interesting, but also, the book does this thing that I find really annoying, where it'll say, oh, all of this stuff happens, and then, like, later on, it'll be like, oh, actually, never mind, that didn't happen, that was a lie. Which I do think is purposeful and is commenting on the true crime culture, but it also does get really frustrating because this book does have basically every single trigger warning under the sun. So you will read like the most disturbing, graphic, violent scene that you have ever read, and you'll be like, oh, that was absolutely disgusting. And then like 20 pages later, Cooper will just be like, never mind, didn't happen. And you're like, great, so why did you make me read that? So I don't think that everybody should read this book, but again, I do think that it has interesting questions and interesting commentary about a very taboo and not really talked about aspect of the queer community, at least not in circles larger than just the queer community. If you have experienced like the online 18 plus queer community, this might hit a little bit close to home because, again, there are some issues that are still prevalent in our culture today that I think that this novel addresses, which is really interesting because I think that this was published in 2004, and so it has like really early depictions of the internet, but it's really fucked up to see how like we're kind of repeating the same mistakes. Anyways, if you decide to pick this book up, I think it will really push your perspectives. I think that no matter what, you're going to have a lot to say about the book, whether you love it or you hate it, but I don't think that everybody should pick up this book. Next up, I have Queer Al by Jean Genet, which is perhaps like the most academic read on this book, but I love it. I think that it is so cool. I think that it's so dense. I think it's so rich. It's just like a blast to read despite being like really abstract. And I don't want to say that like this book is pretentious particularly, because I think that like everything that this book is doing, it pulls off in such a skilled way. And so it's kind of like, okay, talk your shit. Like you can talk your shit all you want because you wrote this. I don't care. I don't really know how to sell it without spoiling it. What I will say is that the back of the novel says that it starts with a Dostoevskian theme of murder as an act of total liberation. And I think that that kind of goes into gay sex as well as the novel progresses, which, I mean, does that not intrigue you? Come on, let's be real. I've called this a gay Fight Club, which is crazy because Fight Club is already really fucking gay. This is just more gay. And then I think that the place of women in this novel is also really interesting because throughout the entire book, it's basically non-existent. We have one female character in the entire novel, but without, again, spoiling anything or saying too much, the novel ends on her. So I think that it does have some commentary and something to say about women in the queer community. Like there is something being said. It just does mostly focus on the queer masculine experience. It's like a fascinating case study. It's like if Tom of Finland took a bunch of acid and then was a book. I don't know. It's really dark. It's really subversive. It's really entertaining. It's really abstract. I think it's a great time. Very dense and very rich, but I don't know. If you allow yourself the time to chew on it, if you perhaps like buddy read it with somebody so that you can have somebody to like bounce ideas off of. Again, I read this in an academic setting. I read this in class, which I feel like did really help deepen my understanding of it, because this is a book that is so bold in its writing. So it can be tricky, but I think that it's absolutely worth it. All right, and now we have the winner of the category that is for the gays only. I think that this is perhaps the pinnacle of queer literature and queer representation, and that is The Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions by Larry Mitchell. I fucking love this book. It's a queer utopian novel that is written in the style of a children's book and has illustrations kind of in the style of a children's book. It is a reading experience that is unlike any other reading experience. It invites you into its own world, and it is such a beautiful utopian world. It's a look into the queer community that goes beyond just white gay men, you know? It explores so many different aspects of the queer community. I think that it explores, like, all aspects of the LGBTQ plus community. It is beautiful. I'm going to read you a section from Women Wisdom, which pops up throughout the novel. The strong woman told the faggots that there are two important things to remember about the coming revolutions. The first is that we will get our asses kicked. The second is that we will win. This was published in the 80s, I want to say, and I love that. Well, I don't love that it's still extremely relevant to this day, but I do think that it is still extremely relevant. Yeah, it was published in the late 70s, And yeah, there's some really cool and unique commentary about the relationship between the straight world and the gay world and how those worlds connect and overlap. And then it also has some very beautiful and inspirational prose and ideas that just make you feel, or at least made me feel, really empowered as I was reading this book. I think that it is absolutely required reading if you identify as any part of the LGBTQ plus community. So while Queerelle by Jean Genet and The Sluts by Dennis Cooper, I think, are both incredible books if you want something that is very tailored to the queer experience and queer representation, but The Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions absolutely deserves to win this category. And that is everything that I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like and you comment and you subscribe and you do all of the shit that YouTubers tell you to do, but you should do it to me because I'm hotter and sexier and funnier. Obviously, I haven't read every single gay book ever, and so if there are some queer books that you think are very important that I didn't mention, feel free to comment on here if you want to give your own nominations for these categories. I think that that would be really fun. But yeah, beyond that, that is everything that I have to say to you guys. Make sure that you stay gay as fuck, and I will see you later. Mwah. Love you. Bye, divas.